Hi, welcome back to the channel. I've been away for 2 weeks on a Euro trip, 5 countries covered, 1800 miles, raring to get back onto this. What we're going to look at today is a split charge system. So that's our way to charge our leisure battery from our engine battery whilst the engine is running. So without further ado, grab yourself a cup of tea, let's get into it. Okay, so very simply, this is a dual-right voltage sensitive relay split charger. This works on vehicles that don't run a lithium battery and the vehicle is not a Euro 6 engine. What we have is our starter battery and we also have our leisure battery. We have a cable that runs from the positive terminal on the engine battery here. It goes through a fuse into our dual-right system. The cable then comes out of the dual-right system through a fuse into the positive of the leisure battery. The only earth is from the dual-right itself. You can see this black cable here, and that runs to the chassis of the van or the negative of your leisure battery. So installing these is as simple as that. There's no extra cables, there's no configuration on this like you would on, say, a DC charger. It is a very simplistic system, but also works very well. So this is the easiest part. Finding a route from the engine bay through to where your leisure battery is going to live is more challenging. So we're going to have a look at that now. Okay, so this is our very mucky engine bay. There will be a video on a full cleanup of this and the outside once we get lifted from this hose pipe ban. So what we can see here is the leisure battery. What we can see here is the starter battery, and we have a positive post, and we need to find a route into the van. Now, I happened upon a good link for a video for somebody that wired, and what he done was wired the cable down through here under the back of the light, up in through the inside of the wing, and then into your A post down in the van there. So I think we will do the same. So let's get into it. So a little recap of what I've done here. So I've used this kind of bit of tube here as a rodding cable, and I've fed it up the wing. What I've also then done is fed the 16mm square cable down through the back of the light, and that's fallen out to the bottom here, and I can pull that up to terminate at our battery. What I can do now is connect the other end of the cable and attach it to this pipe, pull it up through the wing, and then repeat the process, pulling it through into the A post. So that's the cable pulled up so far here. What I'll do now is pull it through to the inside of the A post there, and get the rest of the cable that's excess pulled through too. Okay, so the blue pipe is out the other side, running through our wing. Now I can connect this back up to this, pull all our cable through. So the cable's now routed through, and I've gone down the back of the door hinge, and I will cable tie it to this bracket here. And that will keep it well away from the door. I mean, the door isn't going to interfere with it, but we may as well secure it. And then we can come into this grommet here, which leads out the back under your dash. So there we go. The cable thread through, cable tied here. The cable's not going to interfere with the door because the fitting is behind the hinge, so there's going to be no issues there. It's running down through this grommet into the van and coming out under here. So what I can now do is looking at getting the cable from this point over to this point at the back of the van. Okay, path of least resistance. Coming up across here, we've got a ducting here that I've come over, round under here. Don't forget we've got our under tray effectively there. I've gone down inside and then come back out, and that's running down beside the seat. So I've worked out my final route, I'll show you shortly, but I've also wrapped all the cable in black conduit. Just gives a coating, a protection for any potential wear issues that might come along in its placement. There shouldn't be, because we're inside the vehicle. It's all going to be tucked away nice and tightly, and then it will get us to the back of our van. As we can see, we can't see any cable, so the cable's running across here, in behind here, and then the cable comes out. Put a light on. The cable comes out here, tucked down the side of the seat, behind the seat belt buckle, across the tunnel and down under the van, into the footwell. It will then come out from under the footwell and go into under the bed where it terminates. So that's the way I've routed the cable. Take from it what you will. I don't think there's an easier route. Hats off to the guy who put this out on YouTube originally, of this idea of running it down in the wing. I don't think there's an easier way to get it in. So I will mention his name anyway. So yeah, we can now terminate this onto a fuse, then onto our battery. The cable runs in, down inside the wing, down inside the door shut, through the lower grommet down here, into the inside of our van, across the back, down the tunnel, behind the seat, up into our area where our electrics are going to be. So yeah, that's the route I've taken. Okay, let's talk about cables and termination. You can buy ready-made kits for this. I haven't bought ready-made kits in quite a while now for all the vans I've done, and if you don't have the tools to be able to make cables, I would certainly suggest buying ready-mades. I'll leave a link in the description below for where I get this kit. So what we have is our Durite unit. We spoke about this already. We've got two terminals on the back here. One that's labelled to the positive starter battery, and one that's labelled the second battery positive. So that's going to be the leisure battery. So what we'll have is we'll have our cable coming in and our cable going out. Now, either side of the cable run, you'll have a fuse, an inline fuse. In this case, these mini fuse holders or MIDI fuse holders will take something like this, which is a 100 amp fuse. You always put your fuse rated lower than your cable rated. So this 16mm square cable is rated to 110 amps. So what that will do is, if there's any ever issues, your fuse will pop before the cable. If you put a 120 amp fuse on a 16mm square cable, there is a high possibility, if there isn't ever a issue, that your cable will just catch fire because the fuse is rated too high to allow it to blow. Very important, making sure that your fuses are rated lower than your cable. So what we have is, before we go out to our batteries, we have to have a cable, and the cable wants to be ideally within 30 centimeters of the fuse and the battery. So really I could just cut this in half and use this as the fly lead. So these cutters I've got here make easy work of cutting these cables. Now I'm going to strip off an end to reveal our cable. And what we have, I have a whole box of terminals here. As you can imagine, I do this a fair bit. So what we have now is a copper tube terminal, or a lug, cable lug. And what we have is going to be difficult to see, but what we have is writing on there. And the writing says 16.6. So 16.6 is, 16 is your cable size, and 6 is the size of the hole. So this is a 16mm square cable, so that slides in there lovely, and a 6mm hole, which means that it will terminate lovely onto our components. The important thing is to try and make sure that there is a gap between the insulation of the cable and the lug. You really don't want that gap to be closed up where the cable is onto the lug. You want a degree of separation there. So once we're in that position, we can get our crimping tool. So this crimping tool, obviously it's very, very old, and previous owner Tipexed their label onto it. We have a series of numbers here which relate to the millimetre square of the cable. So we've got 10, 16, 25, 35, 50, 75 and 95. So I'll reel this up to 16. Open the jaws, feed in my cable. Just pinch the jaw slightly, and I want to make sure that everything is in place, and then I can close up. So what this has done is it's reshaped the terminal from being round, so we now have a peak, and also punctured into the back, so there really is little chance of getting that lug out. I'm happy that is super tight. If there's any chance that you can pull your lug out, change what you're doing, revisit it. So repeat the process for both ends, but on the other end we're going to be using a 16/8. So we've got an 8mm hole and a 16mm lug space for your cable. Now the reason for this is because our fuse holder takes a 6mm lug, and the battery takes an 8mm. So if you're feeding this even into a bus bar or a battery terminal, always make sure that the cable size relates. You don't want to be putting, you're not going to be able to, but you don't want to be putting a 10mm lug onto this to try and make a connection. You know, you just, it will never be good. So always try and match your lug sizes to what terminal you're going on. So again, I've got a small separation there between the insulation and the cable, which I'm happy with. Open up the jaws again. Terminate. Always test that cable. Always test that lug. Make sure everything is as should be. So that is one complete. I mean, I'm less than 30 centimeters, which is ideal. So this can go from the fuse onto the starter battery. Then that cable that we run in through the A post, etc., that can go onto there and terminate at our split charge. We're not quite finished with this though, because now we need to add some shrink pipe to the terminal. So this is going to help with corrosion. This is going to help prevent moisture getting up into the terminal and corroding it and giving us a poor connection. So really, in theory, this should last years and years, years and years and years. It'll outlast the van if it's done right. So we lay that on. Now we can get the heat gun. So that's the finished cable. You can take it a step further by adding conduit to it. This being in the engine bay, I will add this protective conduit just to increase the chances and life of the cable in the engine bay. Something like so. But yeah, that for me is how you should do a cable. That's my meat and potatoes of it, as you'd say. So that's our setup ready to go. We have this earth strap here that can go to our negative on our leisure battery. We have this that goes to the positive of our leisure battery. Everything is terminated correctly, everything is safely laid out, visible and accessible, which is important. And that is this end complete as well. So our cable coming in that goes through our wing into a fuse holder that's within 30 centimeters of our battery terminal for our starter battery. This will be the last job that I do when connecting up the electrics. Before I turn anything on, the last thing I will do is add a fuse and terminate it onto the battery. So that gets left now. So that's pretty much the split charge system installed in its entirety there. Hats off to the guy that recommended putting the cable down through the wing and into the van. I don't think there's a better way to do it. We don't want to be running it under the van and drilling up holes and what have you. The split charge system, very, very simple. It receives a voltage when the engine's running. When it gets to a certain voltage, the split charge relay will open up and charge your leisure battery. When you turn off your engine, the voltage on your starter battery drops, and then the split charger will see that that voltage goes to a certain point and it will stop charging your leisure battery. It will turn off. So there's also a little red light on there that indicates when it's running and when it's not, so you've got a sort of visual aid there to help. Yeah, very, very simple, inexpensive. I do recommend that you go with either Durite, Cargo or Merlin split chargers. Those three brands are the only ones that I will use when they're available. These cheap Chinese ones for 15 quid or what have you, you see people swapping them out after a year because they've gone faulty. You know, you just want a reliable component. You know, at the end of the day, it's electrics in your van. You know, so. But yeah, that's it for this video. As always, thanks so much for watching. Do hit the thumbs up, do subscribe down below, and do hit the bell notification as well, so you know when I next upload. As always, We'll see you next Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Morning, buddy. Having a bit of a nightmare. None of your cables are crimped. I don't know who installed this. Probably the guy who previously had the van. But I can just pull the cable out the terminal. It's not even been crimped. So that's a joy. Yeah. Pulled it straight out. I expect it's going to be the same for this. Yeah. Straight out, mate. Oh, that's a far way to happen, dude. Please don't do it.